Okay, so this is my fourth clip pertaining to exchange rates. So now I want to talk about sort of what causes there to be this supply and then later the demand for foreign exchange. So why do Canadians, demand yens, right? And what would cause, of course, Japanese people to supply yens, the foreign exchange? And it's really not that complicated. Okay, so let me walk you through this. When it comes, let's do supply of foreign exchange first. So what is causing the Japanese mainly to supply to the foreign exchange market yens and implicitly demand dollars? Well, basically all this boils down to is all potential international transactions that represent receipts for Canada in the Canadian balance of payments. Right? This makes perfectly good sense. If it's a transaction that involves a receipt to Canada, that means that Canadians are getting paid. Okay? It's a receipt to Canada. So you're getting paid. That's what it means by receipt. It's the opposite of payment. There's a sort of receipt versus payment. So payment means when Canada pays out. Receipt means when Canada gets paid off. Okay? That's all that this is referring to. So any transaction with Canada is the one on the receiving end. We're the ones, the recipients. Okay? So what this basically boils down to is there's Japanese. They've got all these yens. But these Canadians, the people that are going to get paid, don't want yens. Because they can't use yens. I as a Canadian can't use yens in the grocery store or the shopping mall or going to the movie theater because no one takes yens in domestic transactions. So what has to happen is that the Japanese have to supply foreign exchange yens, implicitly demand dollars so they can get dollars to pay me off. And that's all it comes down to. So the three main types. The first one is Canadian exports. This would cause a supply of foreign exchange. Canada ships, steel to Japan. Okay, so we Canada, we make the steel, we stick it on a boat, we send it to Tokyo. The Japanese owe us money. This is a receipt to Canada. They have yens, they have to supply them to the foreign exchange market and demand to get, the Japanese have to demand dollars so they can then pay me off in dollars. Another example is another major category is called capital inflows into a country. Right, let's say Canada has a very big, let's say, budget deficit. Let's just pretend. So the government needs lots of money. Okay, so let's say it starts issuing bonds, these promises to pay in a future date. That's all it is. They take a piece of paper, write up a legal contract, and it's basically an IOU. But instead of borrowing from Canadians, let's say that the government of Canada has to borrow from foreigners, from the Japanese in our two-country scenario here. Right? The Japanese have yen. They have to supply it to this foreign exchange market, so they implicitly are demanding dollars so that they can get the dollars to give them to the government of Canada, and then the government of Canada hands them back of this bond certificate. Basically, right? So once again, the foreigners have to supply the foreign exchange so they can buy what amounts to a Canadian asset. Well, technically it's a liability of Canada, the government of Canada, but it's a liability of the government of Canada because it's a bond, but it's an asset to the Japanese investors, because it will then of course pay out interest, and then it hopefully, assuming the government doesn't default, pays back the principal as well. So it's an asset in the sense that it pays out a stream of interest over a period of time. Okay, so it's effectively the Japanese bought an asset. It's an asset for them. Okay, it's a liability for the Canadian taxpayers ultimately, because the taxpayers pay for it all. And the other one would be, let's say, what they call reserve currencies. This would be like if you, let's say, had the government of France or something decided that it wanted to add Canadian dollars to its reserves. Then it could supply, let's say, from its reserve of yen, supply the yen into the foreign exchange market and demand Canadian dollars. Okay? And you can see that the demand side of this is sort of just the opposite. This is the demand for foreign exchange, the demand for Japanese yen, involves all international transactions that represent payments from the perspective of Canada, for Canada's balance of payments. So anytime that Canada has to pay some foreigner, right, because now we have to supply our Canadian dollars, because that's what we have in our pockets, to effectively demand yens so that we can give those yens to someone in Japan. Right, so one example would be importing. If Japanese, so let's say, ship over some cars, right, then we have to pay them for those cars. So we have to go into the foreign exchange market. We demand yens. So we can take our Canadian dollars, convert them into yen, and then give the yens to the Japanese. Or capital outflows, right? If I'm a Canadian, well, I am, and if I, let's say, I want to buy stock in the United States, right? I take my Canadian dollars, I demand, in this case, the foreign exchange would be US dollars, right? So I'm creating a demand for that foreign exchange, because I want to exchange my Canadian dollars for American dollars, so then I can go buy the stock in the United States, because it's going to be, denominated in US dollars. Okay, so I'm demanding US dollars. And finally, again, possibly with those reserves. So the government of France, for instance, might say that it wants to, if it demands foreign exchange, that means that it wants the yens. So it'd be selling off Canadian dollars. So it'd be taking Canadian dollars out of its reserves, supplying those to the foreign exchange market, and demanding yen back. And that really is it. I mean that is in essence why you would demand to have yens, is because you can't take your Canadian dollars and give it to the guy in Japan. He wants yens. Okay? Yeah, so the reserve one was sell the dollar, demand yen. That's right. Okay, so the next clip, I want to talk a little bit about the shape of these curves. Why is the supply curve sloping up, demand curve sloping down? I'm going to be very brief. There's actually a much more complicated explanation. It's called the Marshall-Lerner condition, but that's really very advanced. Don't want to get into that. But just to give you sort of the gist of it, the common sense sort of, and it's really straightforward. It's really simple. I mean, it might look complicated, but it's not. Why the curves are that shaped, and then I'm going to talk about the whole thing about floating versus fixed exchange rates, and I'll show you table 37.2.